We're about to begin, so if you can find a seat, there's a couple of empty seats there. So if you can come forward and fill the seats, that would be really great. First of all, I just want to give a very warm welcome to everyone to our 7th Gravitas Trends event. This is my second. I'm Janet Cherian, Executive Director of Marketing and Strategy. I see a lot of familiar faces, but I'm also glad to see a lot of new faces. We have a short but fantastic program for you. So I just want to give a couple of reminders. If you can reach into your pockets and pull out your cell phones and turn them off or silent, that would be wonderful. This event is closed to the press, except for Jason Kelly from Bloomberg, of course, wherever he is right now. With that, I'd like to invite our CEO, Jayesh Punater, to start the program.
Good evening. Good evening and welcome everyone. We work very hard every year to try and bring Gravitas to this evening by having content that's contemporary, original, and forward-looking, created through your interactions with the various panels. It has been many years since I've addressed this conference. If I recall, last was 2008. With this level of optimism pervading our industry, that if I was to go out on a limb and make a bold prediction for the coming years, I would say we are entering the golden era for the alternative investment industry. While individual firms may come and go, the overall industry is clearly becoming much more larger, institutional, and permanent. There are 3 key trends supporting this view. Alternative investment industry is gradually becoming mainstream financial services. Firms are aggressively pursuing adjacent markets in real estate, insurance, long-only products, and retail. Current hedge fund assets are estimated to be around 2.2 trillion, and private equity assets are estimated to be close to $3 trillion. Investors, at least the ones that have the biggest impact, which are the largest institutional investors and the sovereign wealth funds, are embracing this industry like never before. And finally, no matter what the regulators and the government throws at the industry, hedge fund managers have figured out a way to deal with them by building world-class infrastructure and being innovative in their business models. Hence, as a provider of services to you guys, I stand very optimistic and excited at the prospects it gives us to collaborate with you to help you build world-class businesses. In many ways, that race has begun. You no longer are just a hedge fund or a private equity firm. You are going to become a world-class business. Today, we are going to be speaking about navigating for new alpha, with our event being moderated by Dr. Vasan. I don't know if he's been there all 7 years, but many of the last 7 years he's been here. And 2 outstanding panels. The first discussion examines the importance of private equity in the industry. Many hedge funds want to be like private equity firms with regards to their client relationships and access to long-term capital. On the other hand, many private equity firms are increasingly looking like hedge funds by building capital market businesses. Today we saw an announcement that Blackstone bought a hedge fund, and that trend is continuing. The second panel will discuss key challenges that both hedge funds and private equity firms are facing with regards to scaling their business and dealing with increased regulation. The traditional models of hiring all in-house staff do not work in the volatile market conditions where alpha production is not in a straight line. And complete outsourcing does not offer the controls that these firms are comfortable with. So how are these executives, these firms, tackling the scale issue while being profitable and compliant? So I'd like to give special thanks to our sponsors, Credit Suisse, Hazeltree Fund Services, EMC, and VCE. With these thoughts, I'd like you to join me in welcoming Dr. Phil Vasan, who is our keynote speaker and the moderator for the evening.
Thanks, everyone. It's good to see familiar faces in the audience, and thank you, Jayesh and the Gravitas team for having me back. I'd like to pick up on where Jayesh just left off. Let's leave Jayesh out on that limb for a moment. And I'd like to go back to frame where we are now by citing one of the early hedge fund managers, Charles Dickens. Now, Dickens described the worst of times and the best of times. So let's talk about that. So Jayesh is leading us to the potential best of times. Let's talk about that. The worst of times. We sit here in the middle of arguably the worst patch that the hedge fund industry has faced since its inception. If you think about market conditions and how they've deteriorated, you think about the divergence now between the performance of equity long-short managers and fixed income managers in this repressed rate regime, in which the pension fund that has to generate 7% is facing zero rates, volatile equities, and for the first time in a generation, in the first time in 30 years, I think we will be talking about the prospect of capital losses on bond portfolios. That's going to come up as an issue. Market conditions have been decidedly unfriendly. So that's one thing that we face. Another thing we face is the condition of the counterparties in these markets, and that's been an area of concern. We face the condition of investors who last year had put, by this time, $70 billion into the hedge fund industry. At this point in the year, it's $30 billion. So investors have taken a giant step back. We then face, as well, what I would call a thicket of regulatory constraints that surrounds us, that's closing in on us. All of these things have made the difficulty of your assignment and ours greater than it ever has been. The worst of times. When we speak with CROs, right? Not COOs, not CFOs. We've been speaking with CROs around the world. And you know what's become top of mind to them? Well, it's changed in the last year. A year ago, this one is easy. Top of mind was the EU balance sheet. Now it's the US balance sheet. We all knew that. But top of mind a year ago was tail risk management. Now it's regulatory risk management. Top of mind a year ago was the stability of your counterparties. Now we would say it's the ability of your counterparties to manage themselves. It's the ability to manage the various constraints that hedge funds present when they deal anything from long-short equity to structured credit. Because those things enter the banks now, and they enter them through different venues, through swaps or stock loan or prime brokerage or repo or OTC vehicles, OTC cleared vehicles or futures. They come in different ways. And depending on how they get there and what they are, they're going to have very different treatment in terms of Basel III capital, risk-weighted assets, balance sheet, all kinds of acronyms now. NSFR, net stable funding ratio, all kinds of acronyms that these banks have to manage. In looking at all this, I was going to add in a few acronyms of my own, but they all have 4 letters. And so never before has there been this kind of challenge among the providers. And chief risk officers, not just COOs and CFOs, are having to face this as a new reality in how they manage the firm. A year ago, it was about the availability of investor capital. Now it's about the quality, the staying power of that investor capital, without which the asset side of the balance sheet is in question. One of the common drivers behind the changes that we've seen in the last couple of years, we believe, has been the public sector. And the public sector now acting both as a policy guide, but then also a disruptive participant. When you look at the combination of roles that the public sector has been playing between regulatory paths to 2013, 14, and 18, but then also fiscal cliffs that we see among the countries that have not managed their own balance sheet particularly well. So this is not going away, and it represents yet another new, I would say, if not the greatest challenge that our industry faces as we try to make money and provide a good delivery to clients, namely the pensions and other LPs. The worst of times. When we think about the change in job description of the people in a room like this, think about it. Profitability used to just be about the management of the investment process. The cost structure in these firms used to be quite small relative to everything else. In 2006-07, in some hedge funds, the cost structure was no more than a cost-to-income ratio of 30% in 2007. Those days are gone. And now the top line has to face things like a financial transaction tax. The clients of hedge funds are no longer just investors or even consultants. The clients are now the authorities. Safety is no longer just about safety of counterparties. It's everything. Safety of assets, safety of technology. The number of new dimensions that has been introduced into the job description of the people in this room is staggering. When we think about best practices, those best practices are for staff. They're around continuity. When we think about new practices, we'll speak on our panel later about things like disclosure and reporting, Form PF, and other variations. We'll talk about OTC clearing, compliance. The number of new practices, along with the number of revisions to old practices, has added a complexity that we've never seen before. When we talk about things like efficiency, which are part of the job description, it's both about growing smart, it's about cost management, it's about getting the maximum buying power from your relationships, it's about managing your time. We actually wanted to hold a time management seminar for the chief operating officers that attended our annual conference, and many just couldn't do it because they didn't have the time. I kid you not. And so the demands on us have never been greater. The ability to make a buck from that has never been harder, and therein is the challenge, the worst of times. So before that branch breaks, let's talk about the best of times, because this industry, if nothing else, is adaptable. It is innovative. It has demonstrated that again and again and again. Now, over many years, one might argue that the innovation has been in the investment process. Now, we're training that on the management of the business around that investment process, where the best practices around performance are as important as performance itself, or as important as performance itself. The new practices, as skating to where the proverbial puck is going to be, are as important as the current practices. This industry is adaptable. Adaptability is the key to survival. None of us are here to survive, we're here to thrive. And so adapting in ways that really haven't been written is paramount to us. And that's the kind of thing we're going to talk about today in the two panels that you're about to hear, and I hope participate in, because we haven't really written the script. The conditions that I just described have been afflicting us in 2011 and 12. And sort of start the clock at the beginning of 2011 to sort of look at the markets the market difficulties that were. Where are we going to be in 2015? 2015 feels like a long way away, but it's really only as far away as was 2009. 2009 was just here, wasn't it? 2015, which is the middle of our decade, will be upon us before you can blink. And so the best of times start with something that never changes, which is the adaptability of our industry. Now, I think the difficulty of assignment means that adapting doesn't bring everyone with you. Right? That's why, as I've said to you before, if it were just about who's big, then we would see Tyrannosaurus rexes down there on Fifth Avenue outside the library instead of their descendants, pigeons. It's not about who's big. It's about who can adapt. And so we're not targeting the biggest firms. We're targeting the best, because the best will ultimately get big or thrive, and certainly do well by their LPs, which is the ultimate answer we have to give. So it's about adaptability, and that's why I actually come around to the tree that Jayesh is on. And you might wonder if there's somebody with a saw at the beginning of the branch that he's on, out of the regulatory framework. I don't think so. I think the regulators are genuinely trying to get us to a better place. Now, that road to that better place is filled with unintended consequences. But they are trying to get us there. Our challenge is to manage that in a way that is not from yesterday's playbook. Yesterday's playbook involves applying a big check to what we have to do. And that's not going to work anymore, because the revenue line is going to be compressed. The difficulty of making money is going to be greater. The premium on doing everything perfectly is going to go up. And everything includes how we prioritize, how we execute, the culture that surrounds that within the firm. Everything toward a more perfect business is now what's in front of us. But if there were ever an audience that I would have the greatest confidence in, the ability to do that, it would be this, the best of times. The other thing that makes this the best of times is that we're here at a Gravitas event where we're challenged to think unconventionally. And I want to tell you, the track record has been 7 years. So I've been doing this since I was in my 20s. Sorry? In the 7 years, the number of solutions that you've already been working through has contributed to where we are now. It's been part of the change in job description. The things that are on your plate now that are actually working, you wouldn't have imagined in 2008. It wouldn't have been there. So we methodically go through them. I do think, though, that from here to 2015 is no longer the 2009 to 2012 path. That was very much the equivalent of a ground game in football. I don't think that's going to work between here and 2015. I think we have to put the ball in the air. Not a 50-yard bomb, but we have to throw controlled, smart passes. And that means we, you, and you cannot do it alone. We have to network with each other. You each have to use your providers to go through them and get the best from the market. And to finish, you have to work with third-party specialists like Gravitas to help you access that most efficiently. In other words, we have to scale in the solutions we are seeking, and those can't be done alone. So with that, it's a real treat to be here at this particular moment in the history of our industry, where the challenge could not be greater, but that's what we're up for. And so with that, we wave to Jayesh, who's out on a limb, knowing that he will get down safely. And with that, I want to thank you for making this particular night possible, and I want to wish you all a very productive next couple of panels. Thank you for joining us.